Welcome to the Bishop on a Bike podcast. This is episode 17. And today we have a conversation with Pastor Carrie Smith, who is the pastor of the English-speaking congregation of the Lutheran Church of the Redeemer in Jerusalem, in the Old City. I had the opportunity to sit down with Carrie while I was in Jerusalem earlier this year, and we talked about her ministry and what it's like to live and work in the West Bank and to do ministry amongst Palestinians and in a global church, because she has people from all over the world coming to worship at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. For those of you in New England, you're going to have the privilege of listening to Carrie at our New England Synod Assembly in June of 2018. The rest of you have the privilege of listening to this podcast interview. Thanks once again to the Mission Investment Fund of the ELCA for your support. Let's get to our conversation right now. So Carrie, just tell me a little bit about, what you're doing here in Jerusalem and what brought you here.
Well, my name's Carrie. I'm the pastor of the English-speaking congregation here in Jerusalem, and I also serve as special assistant to the bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land. And it's my 4th year being here as an ELCA missionary. So I'm here primarily to serve the church and to walk in accompaniment with the Christians in the Holy Land.
And so what are some things that you have a family, you're here with your husband?
I have a family, so my spouse Robert, who's also a Lutheran pastor, is here, but he works for the Catholics. So he works for the University of Notre Dame as director of their student programs in Jerusalem. And then we have 2 kids. Caleb is 19. He graduated from high school here in Jerusalem last year and now is a college student in Berlin, Germany. And then we have a younger son who is 17, and he's in 11th grade in Jerusalem.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a busy life.
It is a busy life. And so what brought you here? I mean, did you have connections? Did you have roots in Jerusalem with work or ministry, or, how did this call come about?
Oh gosh, it was not in the plan. I didn't seek to be a missionary. In fact, I wanted to be a pastor in the city. I wanted to do urban ministry, and so I did my internships first on the south side of Chicago and then the north side of Chicago, and thought I was prepared for any part of the city that you sent me to. And then my first call was in a town of 900 people in northern Illinois. And so I did rural ministry right off the bat, blessing cows and tractors and all of those things. Then I got sent to do suburban ministry in a suburb of Chicago, where I was senior pastor of a church that had more members than the town I was in before. So I went from a town of 900 people to a church with 1,400 members. And then I was quite happy. I thought, this is a great gig. I'm senior pastor, which, as you know, is still not that common in our church today, to have a woman as a senior pastor. I thought, this is a great deal. But the director of Global Mission, Rafael Malpica, happened to have been a member of my church that I was serving. And when this call opened up in Jerusalem, he needed to figure out who to fill it, and he called me up and said, can I talk to you about if this would be a place for you? Actually, he didn't say it quite in that nice of a way. What he said was, Carrie, you're going to Jerusalem, and I'll let you pray about it for a few days, but the Lord is calling. And I wasn't sure I wanted to do it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, what were your what made you reticent about it?
Well, first of all, as I said, I really loved the church I was serving, and I had only been there 3 years, and I had, we as a congregation had made many plans, and together had thought this was a long-term sort of relationship, pastor-congregation relationship. And so just timing-wise, I wasn't sure this was right for any of us. But then I knew that this is a complicated place, and I thought, do I have what a church in Jerusalem would need? I don't know that. I don't know what is it that they are needing. So I was nervous about that. And of course, I knew some things about the Palestinian Israeli conflict here, but I was not and am not an expert in Middle East politics. And so I wondered, how does that play into ministry? But at the end of the day, we did pray about it, called family, and said, well, I don't know how you say no to Jerusalem. I mean...
was that what it was? Like kind of the adventure of
it
doing?
Kind of was. And I also, listening to the counsel of others and to Raphael, who knew me well, and I believed him when he said, I think I see in you something that we need. And I said, okay, well, let's do it. And so this is my 4th year here, and I'm, in a way it feels like a really long time. In a way it feels like I just got here, and Jerusalem's a place with such a long history.
Right, so 4 years.
Oh, it's nothing, yeah. And people's memories are very long in this type of place. So in a way I feel like, how could I mean, there's so much to do, so much to learn in this place. And I just feel like I've scratched the surface.
Yeah. And it's a 4-year commitment?
Well, I've committed to 5, and partly that's because, typically a long-term missionary is sent out for 4 years. That's true. I told folks at the beginning I'd like it to be 5 because our younger son will be a senior next year, and it feels a little unfair to move him across the world and then in his senior year say, oh, now we're done. So the goal is to be here at least through 2019, and then we'll see what needs to happen after that.
Okay. And you said you're not an expert in Middle East politics. I don't know anybody that is. Even
right.
Those people that are experts are...
Even people who say they are, right?
Right, exactly. So, like, for people in New England that they've heard of Palestinians, they've heard of Israel, they've heard of Jerusalem, but they don't pay attention very much. How would you describe what is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict?
Oh, gosh. Well, the first thing to say is that anything you've heard on the news is probably not the whole truth, no matter who you're listening to. It's a very, very complicated situation here. Jerusalem itself is a city that's holy to 3 religions. We have Jews, Christians, and Muslims here in one city, and 2 peoples. So we often talk about we want Jerusalem to be a safe place for 3 religions and 2 peoples. So though you've got who the 3 religions are, the 2 peoples are Israelis and Palestinians. And notice I didn't say Jews and Muslims. I said Israelis and Palestinians because within these 2 groups is a great diversity. So we have Christian Palestinians and Muslim Palestinians. There are Israeli Jews. There are secular Israelis. There are Christians who are Israelis. And so you can see just right there, already we've blown apart what usually is a black and white, supposedly 2-sided issue. Because within those 2 groups is a great diversity. So you have people who have been in this land for a very, very long time, for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And those people are primarily the Bedouins, the indigenous people of the area. And they were a diverse group. There were lots of people here. So there were Jews here, there were Muslims here, there have been Christians here for thousands of years. But then, in 1948, the State of Israel was established, and Jewish people from across the world started coming here because this was a state that was supposed to be a place for Jewish people to find a home. The result of that, however, is that people who had been here already were displaced, and unfortunately, it was set up in such a way that certain people, only some people had all the rights and most of the land. And this is the root of the conflict here, is what do you do when the world, the international community said, we're trying to set up a place that's safe for this group of people over here, but ignored the fact that there were already people in the land. And this has resulted in conflict over these last 68 years now, I think we say, right? 60 years.
You might be at 70 years now.
70 years
This
now.
is 2018,
oh
so
my
70
gosh,
years. Yeah.
70 years. With periodic problems after that. So in 1948, when the State of Israel was established, Palestinians were forced out of their homes and villages, and at times some of them also willingly left, thinking that they would be able to come back when the conflict was over. And this has resulted in a refugee population across the world of Palestinians who have not been able to come back to the land. And some of them are internally displaced. So we have Palestinians who had to leave their villages and set up in another part of this land here, but they still are refugees in that they're not from the city that they're in now, or the town they're in now. So I mean, it's a long-standing conflict. It's complicated. Often you'll hear, well, there have been so many chances to make peace, and one group or another didn't participate, and so it's that group's fault, that side's fault. Some of that's true. There were moments that maybe peace could happen, and maybe there were missed opportunities. But the fact is, today, the conflict is ongoing. There's a military occupation happening of the Palestinian territories, and there's a wall that's been built. So that's, I think, it seems to me when I talk to churches in the States today and I talk about the occupation in Palestine, the image that comes up is this wall. So I'm sure people listening to this podcast too have seen pictures of the wall. This wall separates Palestinians, West Bank Palestinians, from the rest of the land, from Israel.
And that wall is fairly recent.
Yeah, it's only about 10 years old. It's still not complete. It's still being built. It's much taller than the Berlin Wall was and much longer. It's enforced with, at sometimes, hundreds of checkpoints. Some are there all the time, and some of the checkpoints are flying checkpoints. They're just set up suddenly, so you have another place where Palestinians have to show IDs. The wall disrupts the economy. It disrupts access to hospitals, to schools. It actually disrupts the environment. So the Lutheran Church runs an environmental education center in Beit Jala, which is wonderful. And part of what its job is to teach people and to give the information that this wall is disrupting the environment. So it disrupts migration patterns for animals, water. It's really shocking. When we think about the effects of a military occupation, we think about the effects on people, right? And that's terrible. But it's not just people. It's people. It's the land. It's the water. It's the air. Economy.
And the economic thing, if I'm recalling what I've learned, it's about 350,000 Palestinians work in Jerusalem. And is it so they commute into Jerusalem? So they have to go through these checkpoints to get to work and then to get back home.
Yeah, so for example, here in the office of the ELCJHL, we have West Bank Palestinians who work with us. One of them is our receptionist, Bassam. Bassam lives in Beit Jala, which is, 5 miles away? Not far. So if you think about in New England, 5 miles, even with bad traffic, it's not going to take you that long. For Bassam to get to work in Jerusalem, he takes 2 different taxis. So he can take one taxi up to a certain point, then he has to get another one. Then he has to walk through the checkpoint of the wall. So he has to pass this separation barrier. In order to do that, he has to show his ID. Then he has to put his thumbprint on a computer that proves who he is. And he has to show his work permit, which says, I have a job in Jerusalem and I'm allowed to cross this checkpoint. That doesn't sound so bad, except that he's doing that with 5,000 other people every morning. And they're herded through this system that looks honestly like a cattle stall. It's really inhumane, the way these conditions are. So he does that. That can take half an hour, or it can take an hour and a half. It's hard to say. When he gets to the other side of the wall, then he has to take a bus. And we have a segregated busing system in this place. So we have a Jewish bus and a Palestinian bus. So he gets on the Palestinian bus and he takes that to the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. And then, like everyone else, he has to get out and walk because you can't drive in the old city. So then that's, a little 10-minute walk into the old city. So it takes him about 2 hours to commute 5 miles every day. Every day. I heard that story of his commute the first time in a very humbling way. I was walking from my apartment to the church, and it was a hot summer day. It gets really hot in Jerusalem. It was over 100
in the summer, because
in the
today
summer.
it's about 55 degrees, something like that.
Today's beautiful.
Yeah.
In the summer, it can be over 100 for days on end. And I was walking to work, as I always do. I was in my black clergy shirt, my black tights, and my black shoes, and my, everything. And I was so sweaty, feeling really grumpy by the time I got to the church. And I sat down with a sigh and said, "Oh, Bassam, you're not going to believe my commute this morning. It was so hot. It took me 20 minutes and I was sweating." And, he looked at me and he said, "Let me tell you about my commute." And talk about feeling humbled. But at the same time, I was so happy he shared it, and I felt happy that he trusted me, that he could tell me, "I want to tell you the truth about what I go through to have this job every day." And then it made me feel that I have a responsibility. What do I do about that? Do I just say, "Well, that's too bad. I'm sorry for you that you're Palestinian"? Or do I say, "Now, what do we do about this? How can we help make a difference? And do I think it's right?" No, I don't think it's right that this wall exists in this way and separates people.
So what are some of the things that you do? Obviously, Sunday morning worship, 9 o'clock, English-speaking community and congregation.
Yeah, so my job is, as I said, sort of half and half, pastor and assistant to the bishop. I have worship on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, and I have a really unusual congregation. So this is a congregation made up of people who are here to work, volunteer, teach. And so the whole congregation turns over about every year. So my folks are here for 3 months, typically, maybe a year. I get really excited when we get a family that's working for the consulate, for example, because they usually come on 2 or 3 year appointments. And I say, "Yes, I get you for 3 years. This is great."
Some stability.
Yeah, some stability. So, we have about 40 or 50 regulars at any one time. I have 80 people on my email list. So those are the people that I sort of am connected to here. But then we could have 50 to 70 visitors every week. Which is very unusual. So often there are more visitors in the congregation than regulars. And so my job as pastor here is to provide a place, a spiritual home for people from outside of Jerusalem for the time that they're here, and to make sure that they have a place where they can pray, where they can reconnect with their faith, where they can have a sense of community. Because these are folks who are here doing really tough stuff, honestly. Peace negotiations, aid work in Gaza, teaching at schools with refugee children. And, it's funny, in the States as a pastor, I always felt like part of the job of the pastor is to stand up in the pulpit and say to your flock, how are you going to live out your faith in your everyday life? And to encourage people, right? To encourage people to think about it. That church, my faith is not just a Sunday morning thing. It's part of my whole life. And what am I doing to live out my faith? Well, I feel like here I stand in front of my congregation and I see they've all done that. They've all said, "Here I am, Lord, send me," and they're in Jerusalem and they're living it out. And so, I think my preaching takes a little different angle, and I try to be encouraging of what they're already doing,
right?
And to say, keep the faith, keep going, don't be discouraged. We know it's a tough conflict here. We know the world is a mess, but what you're doing is good, and keep it up. So that's
these are not all necessarily Lutherans. You have a really diverse congregation in terms of their Christian background from the United States or wherever. They may not even be from just the United States.
That's right. It's really, that's one of the coolest things about this congregation. We have one Lutheran person on our church council. And the others are, we have a Roman Catholic on our church council, Dutch Reform, Evangelical, non-denominational, and a Mennonite. So it was very interesting.
In different countries also?
And from different countries, yeah. So actually, sometimes people will call our congregation the American Church in Jerusalem, but honestly, we're not mostly American. What I like to say is, if you love Jesus and you speak English, you're welcome. And that's very true. It's very diverse. I love that. I love it because, as you know, in the States, we can get really focused on our differences as Christians, and even among Lutherans.
Right.
Yeah, we have a diversity among Lutherans, and we argue with each other. We even have trouble praying together with other Lutherans, and so it's really fun to be here. And maybe it's because the conflict in the outside world is so great here that you come inside the church doors and we just sort of agree to disagree. We focus on what we can agree on, which is Jesus, and that we all are trying to serve God in our way. And
so that's part of your work. And then the other part of your work is as an assistant to the bishop.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the new bishop in just a second. But so Lutherans are Palestinians that are on the West Bank.
That's right.
So there's how many congregations, and what's that makeup?
So the local church, I've spent some time talking about my funny little international congregation, but the 6 other congregations of the ELCJHL are all, there's one in Jerusalem, and then one in Amman, Jordan, and then 4 in Palestine in the West Bank. And those 4 are behind the separation wall that we were talking about. So Bethlehem, Beit Sahur, Beit Jala, and Ramallah. We have about 2,500 Lutherans here in the Holy Land. And yes, they're Palestinian. They're Arabic speaking. Most of them do not have a passport because they don't have citizenship. They have maybe what they call a laissez-passer, a travel document that allows them to travel. Some of them have a Jordanian passport. Some of them maybe have a passport because a relative or someone was in America and was able to help them. But they are, our Lutheran people in this land are directly affected by the occupation here. Yeah. And so we have a small church, but as I like to say to folks, we have a huge impact on society here, and that's through our schools. So we have Lutheran schools in all those towns I just mentioned: Beit Jala, Bethlehem, Beit Sahur, and
when
Ramallah.
You say schools, you don't mean preschools.
No, K through 12. K through 12. We run schools, and they're very well recognized in the area. They're good schools, and these are interfaith schools. So we have we teach Christians and Muslims together. We have co-educational schools, which is something really special for this area. You know, co-ed is not a given in the Middle East. We have peace education in every school from the earliest stages, which is something really great that we do as Lutherans. Mm-hmm.
And we have just yesterday been a part of the consecration of a new bishop here.
That's right.
And, it's an exciting time. So you'll be working for a new bishop. Mm-hmm. You've been working for Bishop Munib Yunan, and now you'll be working for what we learned this morning. He wants to be called Bishop Ibrahim.
Bishop Ibrahim Azar, that's right. It's he has a nickname, so we're accustomed to calling him Pastor Barhum. Barhum is just a nickname for Ibrahim, but it was really good. I think it was Bishop Susan that asked that,
yes.
To say,
clarify. Yes,
what would you like to be called? And he said, please call me Bishop Ibrahim. So Bishop Ibrahim is my colleague here at Redeemer Church. So I serve the English-speaking congregation, and until now he's been serving the Arabic-speaking congregation. And now I'll continue to be the assistant, helping him. So I can't say exactly what that looks like because I just started today. I mean, he became bishop yesterday. So, but as an ELCA missionary, we practice the theology of accompaniment, which means I'm here to walk with the church and to use my gifts in whatever way is helpful to the church that's here. And so whatever Bishop Ibrahim says he needs from me is what I will seek to do. Probably that's going to entail helping him to write emails or letters, speeches, sermons in English. And so I'm an English speaker. So it's a talent I can bring, and I can help him.
And he speaks English too, but it's not
does.
his strongest of the three languages he speaks.
That's right. He speaks, obviously, Arabic is his mother tongue. He is fluent in German because he studied in Germany. His English is very good. He just isn't as comfortable, and it's something I can help him with. So as I said, that's, for me, it's exciting. It's an exciting time for the church to have a new bishop. Of course, any transition like that is tough, because Bishop Yunan was bishop for 20 years. And so, the staff and everyone are used to his way of doing things. So we're excited and, wondering what it's going to be like in the future.
And it will be different, even just on the surface, looking from the outside, two very different personality types.
That's right.
Bishop Munib, very demonstrative and outgoing, and
Yes.
Bishop Ibrahim, more reserved. But what I got this morning from his presentation was he was not just talking about this emphasis on spirituality. Mm-hmm. When the bells started to ring, I thought that this was an interesting moment as they're starting to ring now outside. He stopped all of our conversation and we prayed. And I thought, he really lives this part of it.
He's known here as a spiritual person, and he served as pastor of this congregation here at Redeemer for 30 years, and so he has a long, deep roots in the congregation. He loves to be a pastor, and I think we expect that he'll bring that same pastoral heart to his role as bishop, and it'll be different. He's just a different person, different personality. He's very soft-spoken. I'll tell you, he's got a really dry sense of humor, to the point that sometimes I can't tell when he's joking with me, and I'm still learning. So he will say something to me with his gentle style, a completely straight face, and it takes me a full 10 seconds to figure out that he's joking with me. So we'll have to work on that. I'll have to get smarter about that. But we're looking forward to this new stage. And of course, Bishop Yunan will not stop being a voice for Palestinian Christians. He's still got as much energy as he ever did and as much passion. And we're looking, curious to see how he will continue to exercise that voice in a new way, not as bishop, but as an advocate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the last thing I was wondering about, one of the things that must be unique for you is that you are a woman as a pastor in this land that is, historically patriarchal and still very much so. You must be, if not, are you the only female pastor in Jerusalem?
There is so we have another woman, Lutheran woman, who serves on the Mount of Olives at the Ascension Church, and that's Pastor Gabby Zander. She's from Germany. But we are the only two serving congregations. And actually, she doesn't have an actual congregation. She serves, the Germans have a church with no congregation on the Mount of Olives. It's funny. But she is here, and it's nice to have that other person. There are, 2 or 3 other women in Jerusalem not serving congregations, but they are pastors doing advocacy work for their denomination. So, but let's see, that's maybe 5 of us total in the city. And so we are an anomaly. And there have been funny things that have happened for me in that way.
Like what?
Well, so people don't know what to call me. So I wear a collar nearly every day into the old city. And I usually get called sister. People think I'm a nun. There's one guy at the 7th station of the cross who calls me Padre. And I don't know why he would call me Padre. Wrong language, wrong gender, but whatever. It's funny. When I was first here, there was a Catholic sister walking towards me. We were walking towards each other on the street of the old city, and she had her habit on and everything, and she was really glaring at me. I thought, oh, is she mad? What's that? She walked right up to me, and she tapped my collar with her finger and said, "What are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a Lutheran pastor, and I work at that church over there." And she looked at me and said, oh, welcome. Nice to meet you. You should come visit us. And it really took me aback, but she just really wanted to know, what is this? What's this about? And then it was okay. And so I haven't had terrible, terrible experiences, but definitely there's a curiosity about the fact that a woman could be a priest. And they do say priest here, not pastor, because they're used to it. And I've had some moments of being excluded, and that's kind of painful. But I think it's great. I feel like I'm an ambassador for women's ministry just by being here, just walking through the street with my collar on. Maybe there's another girl on the street that sees me that thinks, hey, maybe I could do that someday. And hopefully that'll happen here.
Good. So if people want to get in touch with you, support your ministry, how can they do that? Where you're on social media, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, I try to be on social media, have a presence there for people back home. And I do have a blog where I publish my sermons. It's called Knit, Purl, Pray, Preach.
Knit, Purl, Pray, Preach.
Yes, because I'm a knitter. I was trying to come up with something that no one else had thought of. There was this Dorothy Day quote where she talks about the spirituality of knitting and praying while knitting. And so this is what I wanted to call it. So I thought I was so original. Knit, Purl, Pray, Preach. And after I set it up, one day I was looking online and there is an Episcopal priest that has a blog called Knit, Purl, Pray. And I thought, really? Oh, well. But anyway, I publish sermons and reflections from my ministry here. And so people can follow that. I am on Facebook. I like cats. So I take photos of the cats of Jerusalem. So if you're interested in cat photos, you also can see that. It's kind of just a fun way to share images of the city. Yeah. And of course, I'm always looking for sponsors. I can't do what I'm doing here without sponsors through Global Mission. And what that means is you can be an individual that can send money to Global Mission that supports having me in Jerusalem, or your congregation can choose to be a sponsor. And that would mean a longer term commitment of saying, we're going to pray for you. We're going to keep up to date with what's going on in Jerusalem. And as we're able, we're going to give a financial commitment. And so there are some options for supporting me.
And people, of course, can also come and visit you.
Yeah.
I know the folks at St. John in Stamford, Connecticut have been here and
and I visited them. So that's another way that we accompany one another, visiting each other's places.
Good. Well, thank you. This was good.
It's great to have you here.
Yeah. And we'll look forward to having you in New England in June.
That's right. See you in June.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, bye.